Hello and welcome to another installment of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I am your host, Melissa Howes-Whitecross, and I'd like to welcome all of you tuning in through Zoom and Facebook Live tonight. If you're joining us for the first time, here's a quick Zoom 101. Zoom allows you to communicate with us through the chat room, as well as the Q&A box. You can type your questions during the webinar into the Q&A box, and Andrew will answer these at the end of the webinar. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, you can also send us your questions and comments using the comment feed on Facebook, and we'll be sure to pass these along to Andrew as the question session goes. Now, please remember that you can reach out to us through the various social media channels. If you've missed any of our previous Conservation Conversations webinars, these are available on our YouTube channel. I'm extremely appreciative to everyone who has supported the production of these webinars by donating using the Cricut QR code. You can scan this QR code with any generic QR code reader, and it will direct you to the Cricut donations website. Your continued generosity is most appreciated. Time is running out to enter our jackpot birding competition, where you stand a chance to win a 100,000 Rand cash prize by purchasing a 500 Rand ticket. Entries close on the 12th of July, and I know that we could all do with a cash bonus at this time. So please do head on over to the BirdLife South Africa website to enter. And BirdLife South Africa is also very excited to be announcing that we will be launching the virtual African Bird Fair. And this will be taking place in the first weekend of September. So keep an eye on our website and our social media feeds to make sure that you're staying up to date with the latest information. Andrew's also going to be telling you a little bit more about this event during his webinar. Tonight, after the webinar, we'll be announcing the first winner of our Jacana Media monthly giveaway competition, who will be receiving a collection of the incredible natural history titles you can see on your screen. They certainly are great books, and I hope that whoever wins them tonight will certainly enjoy them. Tonight, I am very excited to welcome Andrew de Blocq back to Conservation Conversations. Andrew has been with BirdLife South Africa since 2018, where he was responsible for coordinating the Coastal Seabirds project. In May this year, Andrew stepped up to take over the reinstated Avitourism project. Andrew holds an MSc from the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology, which is at the University of Cape Town, and worked part-time as a bird guide in the Western Cape during his studies. I know he was a big fan of leading pelagic trips, and we are really excited to have Andrew with us this evening. And we're looking forward to all of the amazing Avitourism work that he's going to be sharing with us. So without further ado, Andrew, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks so much for spending your Tuesday evening with us, and I'll chat to you in a little bit.
All right, just checking in, Melissa. You can hear me and you can see my screen.
Perfect. Go for it, Andrew.
Wonderful. Well, good evening to everyone. It is a little bit of a foreign idea talking to myself. I'm currently in our Cape Town offices, and talking to a screen is something to get used to, but here we go. I hope no one is here under the false pretenses that this is going to be a webinar about birding and special birds and where to see them in South Africa. Unfortunately, it's going to be a bit more work focused. I do have good news, however, that in October we're going to be featuring some more birding side of the webinars, and including something which has got me very excited, which is the first time we're announcing we're going to have the biggest bird quiz in South Africa in the month of October, so that's something to look forward to. So tonight I'm going to be talking more about the Avitourism project at BirdLife South Africa and what my job is. So just to let you know that I, as of tomorrow, will have been in this new position for 2 months. As Melissa mentioned, I originally joined BirdLife back in 2018 as a penguinologist. Well, that's what I like to call myself. My title was really the Coastal Seabirds Conservation Project Manager. And now I'm the Avitourism Project Manager, and that's what this is going to be about tonight. So off the bat, it's a good question to ask why BirdLife is actually involved in Avitourism at all. I mean, BirdLife is essentially a conservation organization and employs mostly scientists to do conservation work. So why is Avitourism actually relevant to a conservation organization? Well, if you look at our mission, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, it shows in the last sentence that it's important that we are encouraging people to enjoy and value nature. So this forms a core part of our business, as well as all the conservation. And I hope to show in this presentation that tourism and conservation can also have positive feedbacks with each other. If one is done well, it can benefit the other and vice versa. So that's why we're invested in Avitourism as an organization. How I fit in and how the Avitourism project fits in within BirdLife is as so. So here is our organogram. We underwent a restructuring through 2020 into early 2021. Part of this restructuring process was the formation of these 6 programs that you can see along the bottom. At the moment, the Empowering People program is where the Avitourism project is housed. It's currently just the Avitourism project and the Blocq Center that fall underneath this program. And we are looking to employ a manager for this program, which will be funding dependent, of course. And I think this has been the program identified at BirdLife South Africa with the most potential for growth and expansion, which is really exciting for me coming into a new position, being able to make it my own and really help the project take flight, as it were, if you excuse the pun. So that's very exciting. The Avitourism project manager position is a new position at BirdLife South Africa, but of course, many of you will know that the projects that I've been assigned are not new. They've been around for quite a long time, but in the recent years, the projects have taken on a life of their own and they have need for a dedicated project manager. So we'd like to thank Swarovski Optic as well as Nick and Jane Prentice for their support in making this happen. These are our 2 core funders for the position, and without their support, I would not have a job and we would not be able to run the amazing projects that we do. So BirdLife is a membership-based organization, and of course, our main stakeholders and most of our members are enthusiastic birders, as well as some more general just nature lovers. So it's very much within our interests to cater to the needs of birders as one of our major stakeholders. I think this is probably a good time to clear up some confusion around the terminology used in birding. I think those of you who've joined bird clubs and gotten into the hobby will realize very quickly that there's a whole new language associated with this hobby. But the main distinctions, I mean, you get different types of birders. So you have, well, broadly classed, I mean, there's a long spectrum, but bird watchers, birders, and twitchers, I think, are the 3 main categories. Bird watchers, I would call someone who is just in their garden and sees a bird in a tree and enjoys watching it and just enjoying seeing the birds. Then you're automatically a bird watcher. If you enjoy watching birds, you can call yourself a bird watcher happily. Birders is a term that takes on a little bit more weight. So birders will then go inside and consult their bird book that they've bought to try and work out what exactly is this new denizen in their garden. And birders towards the other end of the spectrum will organize trips to go and explore new areas and see new birds, and perhaps hire a bird guide to take them out and see some new birds. And then you get twitchers, which are the nutters amongst us that will travel great distances and often at the drop of a hat to go and see a new bird, often a rare bird that's pitched up in an area where it is not supposed to be. And if I could do inverted commas there, I would, as of course birds haven't read the bird books and don't know exactly where they're supposed to be. They don't conform to the same rules that we expect them to. So broadly, that's what bird watchers, birders, and twitchers are. It's not a hierarchy. There's no class of birder or bird watcher that's better than one another, but it's often a source of confusion, these different terms within the birding hobby. So there we go. So how does BirdLife South Africa support birders? I'm going to go through a few different ways that we do this, and not all of them are directly linked to the Avitourism project, but I thought this is a nice platform. We've got an engaged audience who are interested in birds and would like to know some of these different ways that we support birders. Yeah, bear with me while I get through this. First up, we have our bird club. So this image is taken from the Cape Bird Club website. Thank you for letting me borrow it. BirdLife actually has 44 affiliated bird clubs spread across the country. At one stage, I think we had over 50. So there's really a huge network, and these cover all of the provinces and all the major metros, of course, Often, in Cape Town, there's probably 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 affiliated bird clubs, for instance, that I know of. So if you are a birder and you feel like you want to improve your hobby, meet some like-minded people, go on some trips and hear some amazing speakers, things like that, then I would highly recommend that you look up the affiliated bird clubs on our website and find one in your area to join. I'm certainly going to be doing that when I have to move to Johannesburg. At the moment, I'm in Cape Town because of my previous job was working on penguins. Wouldn't be much help in me being based in Johannesburg and working on penguins, but now I'm in Cape Town. I'm going to be moving up to the Johannesburg office as soon as it's safe to do so and our office is reopened. So I'm going to be looking for a local bird club there. Maybe someone in the comments or Q&A can give me a suggestion. All right, the next one is the Birding Big Day. Now, for many birders in South Africa, especially the more serious birders, this is one of the most anticipated days of the year. Certainly it is for me. And essentially what a Birding Big Day is an event, a day-long event. It's all in the name. It's 24 hours to see who can log the most birds by sight and sound. And this is in collaboration with our partners at BirdLife, Henk, Nel, and Cornelis and their team who run this, and it's all done on a live leaderboard. So you download the free BirdLife app, log your sightings through the day, and the leaderboard is updated in real time, which really gives it a nice competitive race-like feel. It's a lot of fun. The top teams in the country are just mind-blowing every year. This is last year's leaderboard, the top 4 positions. These are the only 4 teams to get over 300 species in a day. Now, 300 species in a day is phenomenal. That kind of effort is just out of this world, and that kind of diversity in South Africa is really the envy of many places. I'm not sure what the UK's bird list is, but it can't be much more than 300 species total, which will include a whole lot of vagrant species that they've only seen once or twice. So that is a phenomenal effort and really shows the diversity in South Africa. It doesn't have to be a super competitive day. If you want to just take it easy and go out with some friends birding for the day, this is a great excuse to do so, and it's a lot of fun and nice community feel. Of course, this year we are waiting with bated breath to see if this will happen this year. So just keep an eye out on our social media. We will keep you up to date on all of that as we get more information. I think the horizons for those kinds of decisions at the moment are quite short, and we don't really know what's going to happen, but we will keep you in the loop. Then we get the African Bird Fair, and Melissa alluded to this in the lead up to this webinar, that we are taking this virtual for the first time ever. Usually our African Bird Fair is held annually at the Walter Sisulu National Botanical Gardens in Johannesburg. It's a phenomenal setting and has been a really successful event in the past. It's really grown a wonderful reputation. And this year, of course, organizing that kind of event is a no-go, unfortunately, but we've had to adapt and overcome, and I think we've come up with an amazing solution. Congratulations to Julie Bailey, our marketing coordinator, who's put in the hard work and made this happen. We now have an agreement with the company to produce this as a virtual bird fair. So this is very exciting. I think there are quite a number of benefits to having this on a virtual platform, actually. Of course, we enjoy Walter Sisulu as a backdrop to the bird fair, but having it virtually means that people from all over the country, not just Gauteng, can attend. We can have vendors visiting from all over the country and also the continent. So in a way, this will be the first truly African bird fair, which really is a feather in our cap, I think, and opens up some really exciting avenues for international participation, not only with vendors and speakers, but also with visitors and traffic, as it were, foot traffic or web traffic from birders all over the world. And we can tap into international markets and hopefully get some exciting keynote speakers as well as showcasing all of our work as BirdLife South Africa and all of our wonderful guides and associated establishments and tour operators, etc., etc. So look out for this one. I think it's going to be a magnificent event. Then, of course, we also run our Blocq events. So for those of you who don't know, Blocq is an annual thing at BirdLife South Africa. We have it usually tied to our AGM. This year, unfortunately, the Blocq to the Wilderness was cancelled because of COVID, of course. So we couldn't hold the Blocq this year, and we had our virtual AGM just a few weeks ago, which was a big success. Our next flock that we are planning is Flock to Marion in 2021, which is of course very, very, very exciting. Unfortunately, this COVID crisis has thrown us for a loop on this. We are in constant communications with the MD at MSC Cruises. For those of you who aren't familiar, if there are some of you out there, our Flock at Sea events, this will be our third one, is where we basically commission a cruise ship and we go out to sea and look for amazing pelagic birds. The last one we did was a flock to nowhere, as it were, just staying within the bounds of the South African EEZ, the Economic Exclusion Zone at sea. So all the birds tickable on that cruise were tickable for your Southern Africa or South Africa lists. So this year's, or next year, sorry, Flock to Marion will be a visitation to our South Atlantic islands. Marion Island is just basically a speck on the map if you try and look for it, but it's an amazingly diverse island for seabirds, and there's some really, really special birds there. It's also South African foreign territory, so these birds will be countable for your South African list. Of course, Southern Africa, this is not a part of the geographical region of Southern Africa. I'm sure I'm going to get some questions about this, and you're welcome to ask in the questions for afterwards. It won't be countable for your Southern Africa list, but it will be countable for your South Africa list, which brings me on to the South Africa Listers Club. So this is another rather new invention or how can I say this, endeavor by BirdLife South Africa. There was, before this, when it was launched in February just this year, there was no platform for you to submit your South African lists. So BirdLife South Africa, of course, is mandated to protect South Africa's birds, and that is our conservation mission. Of course, it follows then that we have a proudly South African birding focus as well. So we are encouraging people to submit their lists to the South Africa Listers Club. At the moment, I think the top birder on the list is Peter Ryan. He's the director of the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology, and probably not a stranger to most of you. He's seen something like 798 species within the bounds of South Africa, which is just phenomenal. So of course that includes the EEZ out to sea, as well as Marion Island as an area for listing. Anyone with over 300 species within the bounds of South Africa, and of course that excludes areas like Sani Pass past the border post. So you've got to find your Drakensberg rock jumpers and Drakensberg siskins somewhere else, unfortunately, for those of you who've ticked them there. Anyone with over 300 species can join the club. So please do submit that. It's a very easy process. The way to do so is to look up on our website, and you go under the Go Birding tab, and you'll see at the bottom there with the sugar bird is the South Africa Listers Club. It's worth mentioning that this tab is basically where you can find anything related to Avitourism. So I'm going to talk through a number of these projects, including our community bird guides, bird-friendly establishments, and bird-friendly tour operators. We also produce checklists. So the official checklist for South African birds in English and Afrikaans, and we also host the Rarities Committee. So the current chair for the listing committee is Dr. Chris Lotz, who is also the director of Birding Ecotours, one of our birder-friendly tour operators, and gives of his time freely and generously. So thank you, Chris. And our Rarities Committee, I think, is chaired by Trevor Hardacre, who most of you will know. So that photograph on the right is the very famous little crake that pitched up at Clovelly. So that was one of the rare birds that went through the committee. So they do all the vetting for the rare bird records in South Africa. Of course, we produce our African BirdLife magazine, which is one of the membership benefits in South Africa for BirdLife South Africa members. In my humble opinion, this is one of the absolute best nature-based magazines that are made continent-wide. The content in these magazines is top class. As you can see on some of these covers, the photography is just outstanding. We have regular contributions from some of the top birders and also top ornithologists within South Africa and abroad into the African continent. So this is worth the membership fee alone, in my opinion. We also have a shop for the birds where you can buy various merchandise, including our annual calendars and bird of the year materials, including these fluffy toys. So this year is the Southern Ground Hornbill. It doesn't look too dissimilar to the oyster catchers, but I really like the oyster catchers. That one's name is Rocky. So they're really cute, and they make for great gifts for anyone, especially if you've got young kids or grandkids. And lastly, we also curate a very large Facebook group called BirdLife South Africa. So on Facebook, we have our page, which is our official business page, where we post all of our BirdLife South Africa social media content. And then we also have our BirdLife South Africa group, which is a public group. And you can post both photographs, stories, trip reports, all sorts on there. And it's a really nice community. As you can see, there are nearly 40,000 members on this group, which means it's a phenomenal network of birders, mostly South African birders, and the content is limited to South African birds. Unfortunately, we only have just over 6,000 official members. So it's worth pointing out that membership of the Facebook group is not the same as being a member of BirdLife South Africa. And also being a member of one of our affiliated bird clubs does not mean that you are automatically a member of BirdLife South Africa either. So I would encourage you, if you fall into one of those categories, to please sign up as a member. Memberships are a crucial way for us to support our core business as an organization, and it comes with a range of different benefits. One of them is the African BirdLife magazine, which I mentioned earlier, but at its core, really, it's just about supporting conservation work and the really good work that BirdLife South Africa does. So please do consider becoming a member. So now more to the kind of business side of the talk, as it were. So let's recap around what the importance of tourism is in South Africa. According to this report, which is the most up-to-date tourism report released by the government, it accounts for nearly 3% of our GDP. So tourism is a massive part of our economy, and it's one of the fastest growing sectors within our economy. It also indirectly accounts for 8.2% of our GDP. So that is including things like beverages, hotels, and other associated sectors. So again, really, really important to South Africa. It also accounts for 4% of all jobs, and I think a useful way to look at it is 1 in every 25 people are employed in tourism-related jobs. So it's a really important job sector within South Africa. And as I said, it's been a huge high-growth sector and a real government focus to harness that growth. And of course, it's been laid flat by COVID, and I'll speak to that point a little bit later in the presentation. Tourism also, at least when it's done right, has the ability to support conservation. And it's important as well to conservation stakeholders in that it's a primary method in many places to raise funds for conservation. A lot of the money that is paid by visitors to protected areas and lodges and that kind of thing gets plowed straight back into conservation of the areas that people are enjoying. So it is a really important source of funding. Of course, with tourism, one motivation why we conserve biodiversity is to enjoy it. So it makes sense then that tourism goes hand in hand, and that tourism cannot exist without conservation, and subsequently conservation really relies on tourism to exist as well. Now, what is Avitourism? Some of you may not be familiar. I'm going to supply you with the definition here from the 2010 Department of Trade and Industry report on Avitourism. I'll just read it out loud. This niche tourism market is one in which the tourist undertakes overnight travel outside of his or her usual environment to view birds in their natural habitat. This definition applies to both domestic and international avitourists in South Africa. So that is what avitourism is, and that's the basis of my job. Now in South Africa, avitourism is still a niche industry, of course. It's a kind of a subgroup of wildlife tourism or ecotourism. It is estimated, however, at between 1.2 and 2.25 billion, and that was as far back as 2010. So you can imagine 10 years on, with the rising popularity of bird watching as a hobby, this value has probably, I would estimate, gone up 1.5 to 2 times. So it's a very important part and a very important economic contributor. Domestic avitourists spend up to a billion annually, and international avitourists spend roughly about a half to 2/3 of that amount. Interestingly, in this series of reports that were done on niche tourism in South Africa by the Department of Trade and Industry, avitourism came out as the front runner in terms of the highest spending tourists. So avitourists spend the most, and they also stay longer in the country and travel wider. Of course, birds are not just stuck to the tourism hotspots such as Kruger Park and Cape Town, but of course you have to venture into some more uncharted tourist areas to see the really good birds in South Africa and to grow your list. So Avitourists have been identified by the government specifically as fitting their priorities and their growth expectations. So that's good news for us, and the government is on board with this. So why is South Africa so successful with Avitourism? Well, we have to look at why South Africa is such an amazing birding destination. Of course, we have an incredible diversity of 870 species in South Africa. That equates to roughly 8% of all the diversity of birds in the world. And if you think we're just this funny country on the southern tip of Africa and we're holding nearly 10% of the world's biodiversity, well, you've got to visit if you want to see those birds. Of course, we also have a bunch of endemic and near endemic species and 2 endemic families. There are quite a few birders in the world who, rather than trying to target all the 10,500 or so bird species, try to see all the world's families. And this picture on the right by Mike Buckham, the contributor to the Better Birding webinars, is the Cape rock jumper, and the rock jumpers are one of the endemic families, the others being the sugarbirds. So international birders who want to see all the families in the world, they have to come to South Africa. Of course, we have other attractive biodiversity to go along with it. Most birders will be also interested in lions and leopards and the big furry charismatic animals as well. And we have good tourism infrastructure in terms of our parks and reserves, both the public and the private networks of these reserves, as well as really good roads, etc. We're also competitively priced in an international context. It's cheaper to visit South Africa than a lot of other places. And of course, having English as a main language helps as well for opening up international markets. So really getting down to BirdLife South Africa's Avitourism project, there are a number of sub-projects, I guess you could call them, within our Avitourism project, and I'm going to go through some of the major ones now. I won't be able to touch on absolutely everything, but here goes. I'd say chief among all of our projects is the Community Bird Guide project, and I'm going to speak to that in a very short moment. Secondly, our birder-friendly establishments and tour operators membership scheme, and our development of Avitourism in South Africa. And I'll speak to each of these individually, starting with the Community Bird Guides. So this is a project that's been going on for quite a long time. It's been going on for over 15 years, probably close to 20 years now, in different forms. It started when Ben de Boer, Joe Grossel, Sarah Fenter, and others were establishing the Greater Limpopo birding route and thought it would be a useful exercise and a meaningful exercise to train up some of the local communities along this birding route, or at least individuals from these communities, to be dedicated bird guides. So they started with a small party of 8 people that they trained, and as far as I can tell, 5 of these 8 members of that initial group are still guiding, and they include some of our top senior community bird guides. So in this picture here with Mark Anderson, a decidedly darker haired Mark Anderson, so this was obviously a few years ago, sorry Mark. This is David Litswalo, who was, before they took him on as a bird guide, was working as a gardener in one of the lodges along the birding route and had shown an interest in birds and is now one of South Africa's foremost birders. So it's been a really successful project and it's grown from there. Sue Anderson took it over from BirdLife South Africa's perspective with a mission to grow it in terms of numbers and also the geographic scope, and especially spread it out to the KZN and low-veld areas. More recently, some of the names you would have heard in the past are Martin Taylor, who was our special projects manager, and Ian Outram, who trained a lot of our bird guides as well. So really kudos to them and credit to them for getting this off the ground and making it the success it is. Of course, I've only been in this job for 2 months, so I can take absolutely no credit for any of this work, but it has been one of BirdLife South Africa's flagship and most successful projects, I think. So let me take you through a little bit about how this all works. So bird guides are selected out of communities that are adjacent to birding hotspots or in areas that are being developed for tourism. They're taken into an intensive training course We give them a base course of a nature guiding course. So in the last few years, we've used the FAGASA Level 1 Nature Guide course, but any NQF2 level course will do related to nature guiding. We also give them extra modules on specialist bird identification, biology and conservation. And then we also tack on some entrepreneurship and business management skills, because the goal at the end of the day is to have these guys fledged from the program, again, excuse the pun, as fully proficient, self-sustainable freelance bird guides. So that is the goal. And then from there, they don't just get let go into the wilderness to fend for themselves. BirdLife South Africa is quite proud to keep an ongoing relationship with all of these guides, and we have a rather closely knit or tightly knit network of community bird guides, and that's become quite an endearing term, and I think one that people have taken very well to. And if you're a BirdLife South Africa community bird guide, you immediately have a strong reputation, and people trust that you've had really good training and that you know your stuff. So it's become a hallmark in the guiding industry and in the birding communities as well. The bird guides have been massively successful. We've trained over 200, and over 50 of them are still active as bird guides. Others have been subsumed by the hospitality, education, and other tourism and conservation sectors. A lot of them are now working as safari guides or as conservation professionals, as rangers in reserves and things like that. And we don't mind that. That is a success on its own, that we've been able to take individuals just out of communities and train them from scratch and give them a livelihood related to nature and wildlife, if not birds specifically. And they also have become ambassadors for conservation and birds in their communities, which is really encouraging to see. A lot of our bird guides run their own quite successful community conservation education projects that they've set up of their own volition, which is really important, and they're looked up to in their communities as leaders and as holders of knowledge around ecology and biodiversity and conservation and environmental matters. David Litswalo in the picture here, he ran a campaign with kids about litter in their communities and why that's a problem for animals, and why people should be proud of where they live. And now his community has no litter, and that's all through his efforts. Others are running schools programs and planting vegetable gardens and trees and taking outings into local reserves and things like that. So apart from just being bird guides, they are phenomenal people and are making real differences in their communities. So the impact and footprint of this project is way beyond just the fact that they can work as professional bird guides and do a good job of it as well. So I guess what's next for this project? It's obviously a massive success already. So we want to do continuous skills development with our existing guides, and we do that on an ad hoc basis. We also want to look at training of guides in new areas. We'd like to expand the geographic footprint of the project. We have quite a few guides in the KZN area, both in Zululand and southern KZN. We have a scattered number of guides through the Lowveld in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, and obviously another node in Buckestrom. We use the Buckestrom Center for bird guiding fairly often. A lot of the bird guides have visited Buckestrom for their training, and there are, as far as I know, 4 bird guides operating out of Buckestrom in the grasslands, seeing special birds like yellow-breasted pipit and special kohans and bustards, and of course boeters and ruds larks. What we also want to do is we want to work with these guides who have set up conservation education projects. We'd like to support them in this. A lot of them are doing this out of their own pocket and out of their own goodwill, and putting a lot of time and effort into making it happen. We'd like to work with partners and with funders to formalize this, make sure that it's an income stream rather than an income sink for them. They deserve to be rewarded for all the time they're putting into this. And it would help as well if we could provide resources and we could standardize the curriculum, give them skills training that will benefit both their conservation education projects as well as their bird guiding. I think there's quite a number of transferable skills that we could impart and organize training for. So that's one of the things we want to do. Another thing we want to do is to empower our women bird guides. currently only around 20% of our active guides are women. There's no good reason why a woman would not be a good bird guide. I've heard the argument a couple of times that women have much better soft skills and therefore make better guides. So there's that debate going as well. But we'd love to see that number rise from 20% to a more equitable number. And we've been talking with partners about this. There are plans in the pipeline. It's something that Swarovski, one of our important contributors and sponsors, would like to see happen as well. And we have been chatting to projects where this has succeeded, such as in Uganda, where Herbert Biharanga has got a whole army, it almost seems, of women bird guides, and they're making a massive success about it and have been lauded for this on international media such as CNN and all of that. So you can look up that success story as well. So we're looking to learn from them and get them to help us to achieve that goal. And that's the reason there's a snipe on this page. The greater painted snipe is one of the few birds where the female is actually more spectacular than the male. So that's why there's a greater painted snipe on there. It's to highlight the women bird guides. We also want to set up some more mentoring programs. So we have quite a number of established bird guides now that can act as mentors for new bird guides coming into the fold that we have trained. So that's another project that we're going to be working with. It's important here to just take a moment to thank Swarovski Optic. I see Dale Forbes and Patrick Sola have logged in to watch this webinar. To you both and to the organization, thank you for your ongoing and long-term support of this project. Swarovski has been a partner for a number of years now and have really encouraged this and helped to get it off the ground and to the level of success where it is now. Swarovski not only sponsor my position, but also have supplied optics for some of the senior guides. When the guides get to a level that they've been operating for a number of years and have shown proficiency and guiding skills and commitment to bird conservation and tourism, they are granted a lone pair of Swarovski optics. And I think all of us who are birders are extremely jealous of this. Swarovski is known in the business as being the top of the line brand. They're always innovating. In fact, I've just come out of this, well, before this webinar, I attended an exclusive product reveal on Swarovski's webinars, where they have produced a new binocular called the NL Pure, I think it is. And it's got a phenomenal new field of view and a whole bunch of new features and stabilizer, and it just looks like a whole new revolution in bird watching. So they're an amazing company, and they really do care about communities and the environments that they work in, and they have a massive footprint here in South Africa too. So thank you to Swarovski Optic for your ongoing support. Okay, moving off the community bird guides. Of course, you're welcome to ask any questions about them at the end, and I'll get to that. To the birder-friendly establishments. So BirdLife South Africa is obviously a membership-based organization, and one of the membership classes that we have is the birder-friendly establishments and also the birder-friendly tour operators, which I'll talk about in just a second. So the birder-friendly establishments are essentially accommodations that are in prime birding areas and able to cater specifically for birders. So we go through a checklist with them around, are they ready to receive birders? Do they have the necessary resources for birders? Do they have access to guides? Do they have environmentally sustainable practices in their lodges or in their accommodations, etc., etc. So these are real eco-friendly accommodations that are kitted out for birders. They also are signed up to be responsible tourism operators, and there's a whole code of conduct that goes with that. Signing up as a BFE, as we call them, comes with all the regular benefits of being an individual member of BirdLife South Africa. Additionally, you get a number of other benefits, including a dedicated e-newsletter on a quarterly basis, and also access to our networks for marketing through our e-newsletter that goes out to all of our supporters, and marketing on our Facebook group as well, which, as you saw, had nearly a 40,000 wide community reach. We currently have over 60 birder-friendly establishments around South Africa. There's quite a spread of them. If you'd like to sign up as a birder-friendly establishment, just visit our website and go on the Go Birding tab and follow the link to birder-friendly establishments. All the details for current establishments are there, as well as the application process is laid out. Alternatively, my email will be at the end of this presentation, so you can send me a personal email as well, and I'll help you out. And then our birder-friendly tour operators as well. So these are the top birding tour operators in South Africa. They include a number of international companies as well. So for instance, Birding Ecotours there, and Rock Jumper and Lawson's run bird tours all over the world. But they have South African roots, and they run quite a number of tours in South Africa. So on that basis, they're included as a bird-friendly tour operator. They are all required to have fully licensed guides, and they must commit to the use of our birder-friendly establishments and our community bird guides wherever it is appropriate. Of course, there are areas where there isn't an appropriate establishment or guide, and then of course that's to their discretion. They also they must be ethical tourism operators, and we go through a number of checklisted requirements for that. And like the BFEs, they also get a listing on our website and get access to all of our networks for marketing purposes. So I'd like to highlight these 3 birder-friendly tour operators because they've been long-term partners of ours and also have gone above and beyond the regular BFTO and BirdLife relationship. They've supported a lot of our conservation work as well. So Rock Jumper, as you can see on the left there, they actually sponsor a position at BirdLife. The Rock Jumper, this is quite a mouthful, so just bear with me. The Rock Jumper Fellow of White-winged Flufftail Conservation, which is within our landscape conservation program. So they support that. They've also been involved in our annual Kruger birding fundraiser, which is a massive success, and also our raffle, they contributed towards that prize. Cape Town Pelagics also donate all of the proceeds from their trips to our seabird conservation work, especially the Albatross Task Force, and that has amounted to a few £100,000 over the years. And Birding Ecotours, I've already mentioned Dr. Chris Lotz, who is their director. He chairs our list committee and volunteers his and his guides' time very generously to help us out with various operations and campaigns. So that's just by way of demonstration. Of course, there are many birder-friendly tour operators who are very important partners to us. These 3 have really gone above and beyond. So I put them out here as a point of demonstration. Then to our birding routes. So this is something that was established quite a while ago, and to much fanfare and a lot of success. Essentially, our birding routes are structured tourism routes across South Africa, and there are birding routes within each of our provinces. Some of our provinces have more than 1 birding route. I know KwaZulu-Natal has 5 or 6 split up, and basically they are defined routes that people can travel, and it's a structured way to present information on where to see birds, where the birder-friendly accommodations are along the way, which guides to use, what time of year, and all the other information that you need to have when you go birding. They're presented as structured and in these formats of these different routes. Now, I'll admit up front that the routes have aged a little bit and need a little bit of updating. So that's one of the things that's on my fairly lengthy to-do list. So I will be getting to that, and I've already chatted to some strategic people and some champions for the routes about getting those off the ground. So if you would like to be involved in that, just let me know. And lastly, the last factor in my work is just in a more broad, amorphous sense to support Avitourism development. So that takes a number of forms and can be on a bit of an ad hoc basis. Some of the examples of these in the recent past and coming up are, I've just in this last week done 2 podcasts highlighting our Avitourism project, specifically our community bird guides, as well as just talking to people about birding in South Africa. So that's Thatch and Earth and the Birding Life. So thank you to Phoebe and Adam for the opportunity to highlight our work and be a guest on those shows. We're also involved in promoting any resources related to birding and Avitourism that will enhance the experience of local and international visitors to South Africa. So on the left-hand side, you can see on the 9th of July, we are co-hosting a launch of the new revised Sasol Birds of Southern Africa. So that will be on the 9th of July at 7 p.m. We've been heavily involved in organizing that. And then I've already mentioned the African Bird Fair. So obviously that is a huge showcase of birding on the African continent. Unfortunately, the British Bird Fair was cancelled, or at least it's also going to be going virtual as far as I know. So I won't be able to attend that in person. But in the past, my predecessors have attended that and spoken about South Africa as a birding destination, and that's an ongoing partnership with South African Tourism. At the moment, I'm helping them develop content for the UK market in order to advertise South Africa as a birding destination. So there's all different partnerships involved in that, and that's quite a fun side of the work as well. So to some more, I want to say dreary or terrible side of the current day. With the current COVID crisis, I don't think any sector has been more adversely affected than tourism. It's been absolutely devastating. And I'd like to say first up and foremost that our sympathy goes out to all of those affected by the crisis, especially those working in tourism, such as our BFEs and BFTOs, and all of our partners. There's been some really sad stories of important birding establishments and birding lodges that will be very well known to many of you, having to close down. People are losing jobs, livelihoods are at risk. It's not a good sector to be in, and was something of a baptism of fire for me, starting a job in the middle of a crisis. So I've just clipped out some of the news articles and headlines that have been going around, and they all post a rather sad and terrible outlook for the next few months. It does seem that tourism is slowly starting to open up. Unfortunately, the messages from government have not always been that clear around exactly what is allowed and what is not allowed. We've done our best to engage. I've been watching a number of webinars presented by our minister, Mamaloko Ngubane. She's been quite good about putting out public statements around this and engaging with role players in the tourism sector and the Tourism Business Council of South Africa and South African Tourism and others. So we're keeping our finger on the pulse. We're trying to keep our guides in, keep them furnished with the best information and the most current information. But yes, it's not a good place to be at the moment. However, with every dip and trough, there must come a phase of regrowth. So we are involved at a very high level with the green recovery. So essentially, our economy is shot. We've had the biggest contraction economically in 90 years, but you have to try and see a silver lining. One of those is that we can choose to rebuild the economy now in a more sustainable and eco-friendly way. This was a meeting that I attended along with colleagues, presented by the Minister of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, Barbara Creasy, and that's her there on a Skype call. And this was a meeting of IUCN members where we were discussing how NGOs in the environmental sector, can contribute to the recovery of the South African economy, and informing the minister where we think the focus should be and what she should be campaigning for at the highest level of government. So it's really great that we have that interaction. It's a bit ironic that it's taken a crisis to allow us access to the minister, but we're going to take it with both hands. I'm actually leading on one of the initiatives within this IUCN group on how to involve communities in conservation and tourism, and how that can create jobs and build the economy. So I have a leadership position within all of this, which is great. I've also taken this issue to heart personally. I had an opinion piece or a thought piece published on the Daily Maverick on how this COVID-19 crisis gives us an opportunity for a green recovery. So you can read my thoughts and my missive on that on Daily Maverick as well. So it's something that I do feel personally about, and I feel quite strongly, and I think that BirdLife now having this position gives us an opportunity to really make a difference and make sure that this recovery is done right. Of course, we have to look a little bit closer to home as well. We can't just engage at a national, very broad context. So in when the lockdown stage level 5 was announced and it became apparent that tourism was going to grind to a halt, an absolute, a dead stop. BirdLife South Africa was proactive about thinking how this would affect not only us but also our broader communities. And one of the groups we identified was as risk was the community bird guides. I've already told you what upstanding, great people these are. Unfortunately, they don't have a whole lot of money stored away for the most part. They also are often supporting both generations, that being their kids and their parents and extended families, with their guiding money. And they were really in a predicament now when the lockdown hit and they had no source of income. So BirdLife South Africa set up a small committee of myself, some of senior management, and a couple of board members to go ahead and establish what we call the Community Bird Guide Relief Fund. This was actually my first task as the Avitourism project manager. I took some time out of my work as a penguinologist in the last 2 weeks of April before I started in May to get this off the ground because it was an urgent need. And we launched this relief fund with 20,000 Rand of our own money and challenged, or not challenged, but appealed to the bird watching communities and others to give what they could, support the community bird guides. And of course, we realized that this was a very tough time for many, many people financially, but I am just blown away by the generosity of the birding community, both in South Africa and abroad. The response was absolutely amazing and is really testament to the high regard that the bird guides are held in by the birding community and how much love there is for them out there. So within 2 weeks of setting up the fund, we were able to send out a first round of payments to 35 bird guides. We are now supporting 40 bird guides with monthly payments that help to cover all the essentials like food, water, medicine, rent, and all the associated costs just to get them through. Of course, we're not able to replace all of their earnings, but we are at least able to keep them and their families going, which means a phenomenal amount to the community bird guides. So on their behalf, thank you to all of those who have contributed. And we were just inundated with amazing messages and pictures like these. This was within a few hours of receiving the first payments from the Community Bird Guide Relief Fund. Yes, Sifundo, for example, saying, just returned from town, thank you so much, BLSA, and a full car boot of essential foods to feed his family and his kids. So really, from the bottom of our hearts, that has made a massive difference, and I'm so happy to present this slide full of smiles and gratitude for all of the people who contributed to this relief fund. It really has been a literal lifesaver in some cases. People were left absolutely stranded, and they are just blown away by the generosity and goodwill shown by the birding community, and that includes individuals, organizations, foundations who've all chipped in to make this possible. We are still collecting donations for this. At the end of this talk, I'm going to present a slide where I have those details laid out on how you can contribute. At the moment in the fund, we have about enough to keep everyone going until around October. We're just a little bit short for October. We'd like to push that out until November or even December if we can. Currently, and this is the first time we are availing this publicly, we have around 650,000 Rand in the Community Bird Guide Relief Fund. Not in my wildest dreams did I think that we would be that successful, but again, that is down to the generosity of the birding community and the real love and goodwill that's been shown to our community bird guides. And as you can see here, they all appreciate it massively. Thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone who has contributed. So I guess winding down now, where do I want to go with this project? I've had 2 months in the job, or as of tomorrow, I'll have had 2 months. I've found my feet. I've got up to date on all the various projects that I've been assigned, and it's very clear that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in this new role. I mean, you can already see there's been massive success in our projects. So it's now, how do we grow these projects? How do we improve our footprint and our impact in the communities in which we work? So I'm looking at a lot of different opportunities at the moment. There's a lot of partnerships that are becoming apparent with other NGOs. We had a really nice meeting this morning with a bunch of colleagues talking across different collaborations and synergies that can happen with another NGO in the KZN area. We also have potential projects with government now through this IUCN engagement, and we've had some really positive feedback on that. They're really keen to get community projects up off the ground. So we potentially have some really nice support on that. And we want to be able to make sure that we come out of this crisis and make sure that birds and birding are forming an integral part of the South African economy going forward. So yeah, I'm open to suggestions. There are many potential collaborators who I'm sure are watching this, and people who have good ideas, so I welcome those. Just in closing now, I'd like to say, please, if you have the opportunity and the means, do support our bird guides and our BFEs and BFTOs. It is a rough time out there for anyone working in tourism. Of course, we don't want to do this with any compromise in the risks of health. So please do this in a sensible fashion. I have been working with the guides to draw up a list of protocols for leading bird tours in the time of high infection risk and how this can be done as safely as possible. So if you use a community bird guide, they should be fairly clued up on how this shall work. And I've also written up a draft of protocols for birders to use when they go out on their own. So do look into that. Those are under our position statements on our website. But again, just support people where you can. Once tourism is allowed and it's clear what the regulations are, please, if you are going birding, make sure to support local businesses and individuals and small to medium-sized enterprises. Everyone is struggling right now. So thank you to everyone for listening. And as I promised, these are the details for the Community Bird Guide Relief Fund, that is a SnapScan code, as well as our bank details for EFTs. The SnapScan code, I will just warn you that there is a commission based on that, so we would prefer it to people with EFT. And if you are going to EFT, please use the details BG, so for bird guides, and then your surname as a reference, so that we can get a hold of you. We are also a registered NPO, so we can provide you with a Section 18A tax certificate, so you can get a tax benefit as well as benefiting the bird guides, and that goes for all conservation donations to BirdLife South Africa. And lastly, just to finish off, Melissa, before I hand back to you, again, a big thank you to Swarovski Optic for your ongoing support and making sure that this position and the associated projects are well supported and thrive, as well as Nick and Jane Prentice, who came on as new supporters when I started my new role. So thank you to them both for supporting Avitourism in South Africa as well as me. All right.
Andrew, thank you so much for that. I think that was one of our best webinars yet. So really the work that you're doing is unbelievable. And I think Avitourism from a BirdLife South Africa standpoint is in excellent hands. So well done. And thank you so much for sharing all of that amazing information with us. I'm really chuffed to see that we're going to be pushing lady bird guides going forward. Female birders has been a passion of mine, so well done. And I look forward to seeing many more ladies taking to the field and guiding. It's wonderful. So before we move on to questions, Andrew, I'm going to need a little drum roll from you because we need to announce our Jacana Media winner. And I'm really excited to announce that our winner this evening is one Jim Rankin. So congratulations, Jim Rankin. I think Jim was tuned in. I did see his name there not too long ago. So Jim, you'll be receiving the Featherings True Stories in Search of Birds by Vernon R.L. Head. You'll also be getting the Roberts Bird Guide and Trevor Carnaby's Beat About the Bush. I'll be getting in touch with you tomorrow to arrange that delivery. Well done, Jim. And to those of you who missed out this month, we'll be launching a brand new monthly giveaway tomorrow. So be sure to check out our website and sign up for the July monthly giveaway. Now, next week, we look forward to a webinar by the White-winged Flufftail team. So be sure to tune in and check that out. It's a wonderful conservation story of a very elusive little bird that we knew very little about going into this project over a decade ago, and the team has done some amazing research to figure out just where these birds are, what they're all about, and how we're going to save them. So make sure to tune in next week, 7 p.m, and listen in to our white-winged flufftail team. Now, those of you who'd like to get in touch with Andrew during this question session, you can type your questions into the Q&A box, and thank you to those of you who already have. And if you're listening to us through Facebook, please feel free to drop us a comment in the comment feed. I will keep an eye on those as well. So Andrew, I'm going to kick you off with a question from Pamela Isdell. For those of you who joined in a little bit late, Pamela is one of our honorary patrons, and she's tuning in tonight from France. So Andrew, Pamela's asking, how do you expect to upgrade the birding routes which you spoke about? What is actually required in this upgrade process?
So I think the birding routes, as they're established, are a really good base to work from. And I don't think there's a lot of work that needs to go into them, but certainly some of the information changes, especially one of the worries is around security at some of the sites. Some of the birding sites, unfortunately, have gone down in their condition and are now not as safe to go as they were. So we don't want to be putting out information that, you know, areas to go birding and then there's an incident or something like that. So that's one of the key areas, just to update all the information on what birds can be seen, what precautions need to be taken. We need to update the available accommodations in the area as well. Lodges come and go, as well as the guides in the area. So all of that information needs a little bit of an update. It was launched a few years ago and was up to date then, but things obviously change over time. So it just needs a little bit of tweaking here and there. And I think we can relaunch the birding routes as another lovely push for avitourism in South Africa. I think it's a really nice structured way to deliver information around birding and birds in South Africa.
Absolutely. And we've got a question from Luke Bridle asking, how does one get involved with the Blocq to Marion cruise?
Yeah, so Blocq to Marion, there are still 500 or 400 berths available to book. So you can still book for Blocq to Marion. Of course, keep in mind, we are waiting on a decision from MSC. And I believe, Mark can correct me here if I'm wrong, but we are having a meeting to discuss that with Ross Falk, who's the MD of MSC Cruises, in 2 weeks' time. So we should have some final answers by then on how Blocq to Marion will go ahead. I don't think it's a question of whether Blocq to Marion will go ahead. I think it's a question of how will it go ahead. So just watch our announcements for that on social media. But Luke, in the meantime, if you would like to book, there are still berths available. So go ahead, just call up MSC. There are also details on our website. If you look up Blocq to Marion, if you just Google it, you should have all the booking details on the Blocq to Marion landing page, as well as all the information about the various guides that will be joining us and the birds you can see and the cetaceans and all of that as well. So.
Yeah, Blocq is a truly unique experience, having 2,000 odd birders crammed into a tiny space, as birdwatchers were often sort of the minority in open spaces, and on the Blocq to Marion cruise, everywhere you look there's birders. So it's certainly well worth attending if you're a keen birder looking to meet the broader community. And it's certainly been a phenomenal highlight in my birding career. I was lucky enough to be on the 2013 and 2017 cruises. So looking forward to Blocq to Marion, and let's hope that it goes ahead sooner rather than later, but we'll wait on MSC to find out when that will be. Now, following on from Luke's question, Verity is asking, we need to be honest here. Let's talk about seasickness. What are the general conditions like, and how have previous travelers who are possibly prone to seasickness managed this? I don't know about you, Andrew. I was one of the lucky ones who didn't suffer too badly with seasickness, but have you got any advice for our travelers hoping to avoid feeding the fish?
Well, no, I mean, the more chum we have going off the side of the boat, the better, isn't it? No, in all seriousness, I mean, BirdLife South Africa is not going to give out any medical advice. Of course, we can't take on that risk, but chat to people who have been on many pelagics. Some suffer more than others, of course. I will say that being on a massive ship like one of the MSC liners is going to be much easier for people who suffer than going out on a small pelagic out of Cape Town or Durban on a little ski boat. So hopefully you should be fine. There are a number of different medical options out there, and some people take a concoction of different things to help them out. Usually it'll just be, for the first day or two, it might help to take some seasickness pills, and by the third day or so, you should have your sea legs and you should be fine. It is worth preparing yourself though, because when we get down to Marion, there's a name for the band of latitudes in the 40s, and they call them the Roaring 40s. So it is rough down there. We are down in the deep South Atlantic, and the weather especially is going to be rough. We're probably looking at either single degree temperatures Celsius, and wind and rain to beat the best of us. So yeah, pack some warm gear, but the birding promises to be well worth it. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, we're very much looking forward to that. And just a note to everyone, we're hoping by mid-July we will know from MSC what's happening with our Flocked Marion cruise. So please just keep tabs on our social media feeds and our BirdLife emailers and the website. As soon as we know something, we will be passing all of that on to you. So bear with us, these are uncertain times, and we just ask you for your patience. We will hopefully have an answer for you midway through next month. Now, we've got a comment from George Ledeck, Andrew, and I'm not sure if this is something we have addressed in our BFE sort of advice that we provide to these lodges. So George is asking, could you please add a guideline for the birder-friendly establishments not to have free roaming outdoor cats? Obviously, we know that outdoor cats do cause damage to our local biodiversity, and they do catch birds, unfortunately. So he's suggesting that we possibly advise these lodges to keep their outdoor roaming cats under control. I'm not sure if that's something that we've addressed before in our BFE program.
I don't actually think it's something we've addressed specifically. I think it's a good point, and we can refer anyone to BirdLife South Africa's position statements on cats as an instructional document. So yeah, thanks for that input.
Yeah, definitely. We've also got a comment here from Peter Wright, and Penny Abbott's comment also goes along these lines. So Peter's asking whether you have a project that supports the concept of birding tours linked to logical tourism interests such as golf or fly fishing. We know that we had a great chat with Mark McNulty and Tony Johnston a couple of weeks ago, chatting about golfing and birding as sort of mutual hobbies. And he was wondering if we have any tourism groups that are focused on combining these sort of outdoor hobbies more broadly.
So it's not something that BirdLife South Africa has ever done. Of course, we're not a tourism operator ourselves, in that way at least. But I will tell you that there are developments in the pipeline. Just speaking specifically to the golf interests, I know that Michael Wright, who was tuned in tonight, has been chatting to Mark McNulty about potentially taking this and making a serious business of it. And I know that there are people who do fly fishing and birding tours. Dave Weaver in the Free State near Harrismith, he does those kinds of things as well. And there are people out there who do it. It's not something that BirdLife South Africa does or any of our community bird guides are involved in, as far as I know. But those opportunities and little niche interest tours do exist and are growing.
Definitely, and we look forward to seeing them grow even more once we can all get out there and hopefully travel a bit wider than we currently can. So moving on to our competitive birders. So we've got a question from Christo Fenter, speaking in regards to birding big day. And Christo is asking whether it's not time to implement some kind of handicap system to assist our areas in the country with lower numbers of birds. So possibly looking at areas trying to get the sort of highest percentage of birds that you could possibly get in an area or not. I know from our standpoint, birding big day is really whatever you want to make of it. And you can compete with people on whatever sort of scale you'd like to. I don't know if you have any comments towards that or suggestions for making birding big day the best day you can, Andrew.
Yeah, Christo, this is something that I actually took BirdLife South Africa up on myself before becoming an employee of BirdLife South Africa. Obviously, being in the Western Cape, we don't have the diversity to match the guys in the Lowveld and north of Pretoria, where the real high tallies come from, and in KZN, of course, as well. So last year was the first time that BirdLife South Africa had provincial aspect to our Birding Big Days. So you can compete in the national competition, but you also are, based on the location that you submit in your registration for the Birding Big Day. When you register your team, you give your midpoint. Based on that, you are allocated to a province competition as well, in addition to the national one. So, for instance, last year I was just competing against other people in the Western Cape. So that added an extra dimension that I could look and say, oh, well, we're coming 30th in the country, but we're coming second in the province. So, we've got to keep going. So that does add an extra aspect. I think the handicap system is really interesting. It's difficult to implement. I think the SABAP data is out there that we could use. I think it would maybe work better for those who are doing a Birding Big Day in a single pentad. So there are people that do that. They do a full day atlas card as their Birding Big Day effort, and that would be an easy one to do if you look at the percentage of birds you get out of the total that have been recorded before. And that's a really nice idea, but a little bit more logistically difficult to implement on a large scale.
Definitely, and I think that's the beauty of Birding Big Days. You really can make it what you want it to be and make it as competitive or uncompetitive as you would like it to be. So the big thing is that you go out there, have fun, and it gives you a really great excuse to bird from midnight to midnight if that's your key plan. But yeah,
there are different, as you say, different ways to do it, and I've done it different ways. I've done the midnight to midnight thing in Cape Town, and we had over 200 species in a day, which was amazing, but absolutely draining, and was months of preparation leading up to it. And I've also done one when I was lucky enough to be based in Kruger Park, and myself and 3 friends used it as a good excuse to do a day-long game drive to the Kruger Park and just record the birds along the way. And that was also a fantastic experience. So Birding Big Day is just a great excuse to get out birding, and you can do with it what you want to. Yeah.
How hard were you looking for those Indian miners on Birding Big Day in Kruger?
That story. Oh, no.
Story for another time.
For the listeners that are out there, I was working on a conservation education or conservation ecology course in Kruger Park at the time, and a friend and I went out for sundowners at Lake Panic outside Skukuza and drove past the golf course at Skukuza, and there were 2 Indian miners in the last light of the day on one of the greens, and we kind of noted that and thought maybe we should call someone about this, but it was nearly night time and was Birding Big Day the next day. So we got up the next day, did the dawn chorus at the golf course, spotted the miners and called the guy immediately and said, come, there's miners, you need to exterminate them. But it was only after we ticked them, which was a little bit unethical, I guess.
Thanks for sharing that one, Andrew. Now, Cameron Kroll's asking, in your introduction, I mentioned that you were a part-time guide during your postgraduate studies, and he wants to know how one goes about getting involved in part-time bird guiding while studying.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll tell you my story and I'll give some more general pointers. So I was studying at the Fitzpatrick Institute and had met a couple of people who were established bird guides and worked in the industry, and went out on a pelagic with a gentleman named Jason Boyce, who worked for Birding Ecotours at the time. And he was a young guy at the time. I think he was 24 or so when he took it out, and I was maybe 22 or 23 when I did the pelagic. And I loved the pelagic and thought, I can't, this is quite expensive for a student to go out. Maybe if Jason can guide, maybe I can guide. And I just literally went to Callan Cohen, who's the head of Birding Africa and Cape Town Pelagics, and said, Callan, can we meet? I'm interested in bird guiding, especially pelagics. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And we had a meeting, and Callan said, sure. You seem like you know what you're doing. What are you doing this weekend? And I said, well, nothing. Do you need me? And he said, yes, there's a pelagic boat going out, and just happens I'm looking for a guide. So I happily signed on, not knowing that it was the World Seabird Conference in Cape Town that weekend, and I had a boat full of albatross researchers. Now here's Andrew, who's done, I think it was 2 pelagics in his life at that point, taking out and showing birds to a bunch of albatross researchers from France and Argentina and all over the world, Australians we had on the boat. Turns out they didn't really need a guide, of course, because they know their seabirds very well already. But it was literally just a case of me going ahead and asking for the opportunity and being willing to put my hand up. So try and make those contacts and grow your experience, write down a little CV, and then make some approaches. I'm not sure where you're based, but find someone local who's running tours and say, can I shadow you for a bit, or can I run a tour for you? And these are my credentials, and see where it goes.
Thanks for that, Andrew. And I think the first time that you and I actually crossed paths was on a pelagic out of Cape Town. So yeah, nice to see how far you've come since then. We've both found our way into bird life. But we've got a question from Ken Maud asking whether we have any guides based in the Waterberg area.
In the Waterberg, so I know of one offhand. So Lucas Namanyane, he does a lot of guiding in that area. I see Melissa's nodding her head. He knows Lucas. So he is one to look up. He is based out of Soweto at the moment. I'll mention here that all the community bird guides details are on our website. If you just go on Go Birding, it's one of the tabs across the top, and then find the community bird guides. Lucas's details, as well as all the other community bird guides, will be there. So the man you're looking for is Lucas.
Thanks, Andrew. Now, Margie Roper's put a comment in here talking about the fact that BirdLife Sandton does a lot of children's bird walks, and really just how key it is to encourage children and the youth in general to get involved in birding and sort of grow that passion, so that one day, hopefully, when they have disposable income, they too can participate in the wonderful hobby that is avitourism. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit on just some of the amazing work that our community guides have started doing with some of the youth in their areas, and really just growing that passion for nature.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been phenomenal that the guides and a large contingent of the guides at that have just of their own volition and from their own funds, decided to start these education projects. And they come out of the training with BirdLife so passionate about the environment and the birds, and they feel not the obligation, but the duty to pass that knowledge on. So yeah, there's a number of different schools projects that they're running. Some of them are working with multiple schools in their communities, and they've made a little project of it. I've seen them installing vegetable gardens and bird feeders, and taking school groups out and guiding them for free. So taking them out and giving them professional guiding services. There have been some wonderful donations of binoculars and bird books from members of our birding community and BirdLife supporters. So on that note, if you do have binoculars or bird books that you would like to find a new home for, certainly get in touch with me, and I will distribute them to worthy projects that the guides are running. They always need that kind of support. Yeah, it's some really, really lovely projects, and I think what's really nice is birds are used as a gateway. So it's through learning about birds that they learn about nature and the environment more generally, and also other life skills, like leadership and interpersonal relations and taking responsibility, and all of these different little skills that can come, through birding as a secondary skills development portal. So yeah, some really, really lovely projects.
Absolutely, and we're so grateful to our guides for really being those advocates on the ground for us, growing that conservation cause over and above their own sort of guiding work. So a shout out to all of them who really do put in that extra mile and live their passion. We've got an anonymous question asking if you can explain a little bit around whether there's criteria involved in becoming a community bird guide and accessing the training.
So criteria, the only requirement we have as a standard requirement is that you have a matric certificate, and the reason for that is related to the level of the qualification. So it's related to the NQF system, so you need a matric to graduate up to the next NQF level, as I understand it anyway. So that is the only requirement. Then obviously, when they're selected, we generally are selecting them out of a pool of people in communities that are adjacent to areas that are being developed or birding hotspots that have been identified, and that we've managed to secure funding to develop avitourism in that area. So where the guides are selected from is often dependent on where the funding is coming from.
Thanks, Andrew. And we've got a question from Bob asking whether you have an inside track to sand parks and you might know when they're going to start letting us do overnight stays in the parks.
I wish. I think we're all waiting with bated breath to hear when that announcement comes out. There were some promising noises being made around adjustments to level 3 and having tourism open up a little bit in the parks. As I understand it, I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I've read the legal gazettes. It seems to me that parks are allowed to be open, but that overnight stays are not yet allowed. Unfortunately, we have to abide by those regulations, and I think they're all out there for our best interests. I do not envy the people having to make these decisions at the top level at all. I think they have a really difficult job, and we need to give them kudos for managing it like they have so far. But it is frustrating, and we get that. We all want to go out birding and spend, you know, a couple of nights in the Kruger Park or in some other park, just enjoying nature and not being stuck in our houses all the time. I feel your pain.
Yeah, I think when they finally do give the go-ahead, there are going to be a lot of leave forms put in at BirdLife South Africa and stuff are going to be out there enjoying the birds that we love.
Managers need to be inundated.
Definitely. Yeah, I must say, one thing that has been interesting with this lockdown is I've had to explore Gauteng a little bit more extensively. I've always birded beyond the province most of the time, but been making good use of our Gauteng natural spots. So it's definitely forced me to pay a little bit more attention to the birds closer to home and not venture as far as I typically would in a weekend. We've got a question, or really a comment, from Eleanor Mary, Eagle Eyes Eleanor. She's always making sure that our grammar's up to scratch on all of our work. So thanks, Eleanor, for those comments. But she's asking whether there's a way to suggest our affiliated bird clubs that are potentially running children's focused birding outings. And some fun talks that really relate to youth specifically. And that's a really nice idea, and maybe something that we need to dial into a little bit more and make a bit more noise for our younger birder members, and also within our clubs to really focus on drawing in those youngsters.
I mean, I'm mostly familiar with the Cape Bird clubs, having spent the most time here. And I know that some of the bigger bird clubs do have existing projects on working with kids, and also in underprivileged areas. So just recently, actually, it's a nice time to announce that, I guess, if Priscilla is watching, Cape Bird Club have come on board in collaboration with some of the other bird clubs and projects in the area to redistribute a whole lot of Afrikaans Sasol 4 books that were donated to us by Strake. Obviously, they're getting the Sasol 5 in now, so they chose to generously donate the old Sasol 4s still in their warehouse to us, and we are using that to bolster the programs with schools with which the Cape Bird clubs are running. So there are projects out there. I think it's a nice idea that we actually pull together what youth development projects there are out there with our affiliated bird clubs, and maybe get them together and share lessons learned and their resources and things like that. There's maybe a nice option for synergy there. So thanks for that suggestion.
Definitely. And a little bit later on in our webinar schedule, all the way into September, Christy Garland, our Vuckstrom Tourism and Education Manager, will be giving a talk on how to start junior bird clubs and really make them effective and make them sustainable. So those of you who are looking to start youth clubs in your areas, that's definitely one to watch out for.
I think also,
don't
mind, I think it's a good time also to mention that we have a lot of resources online, especially related to our Bird of the Year projects. So every year BirdLife South Africa has a new Bird of the Year. This year is the Southern Ground Hornbill, and a critical part of that is developing a whole lot of educational material that is related to everything from lessons plans to coloring in templates and all sorts. And as I understand it, we're in the process of translating this year's materials into some of the African languages. And we have some of our staff helping out with that into Xhosa, Zulu, and Tshivenda. So we'll be able to distribute those resources to new programs where English is not the common language spoken in those communities. So that's also really nice, and those are free to download, and you can access them on our website.
Yeah, we're really, really excited that we're finally offering our Bird of the Year materials in languages beyond just English. So fantastic to see those materials that'll be able to reach a much wider audience. And we know how charismatic and beloved the Southern Ground Hornbill is. And another webinar you can watch is our Southern Ground Hornbill Bird of the Year one, which is on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more about the Bird of the Year campaign, go and check out that pre-recording. Dr. Lucy Kemp from the Mabula Ground Hornbill Project presented that with me a couple of weeks ago. So I think, Andrew, we're just about at 8:30, not quite, but I think we've had some really great questions and comments this evening. And thank you so much for really just sharing your passion and your enthusiasm for AVTourism and birding in South Africa in general. I'm really proud to see just how far you've come in the 2 months that you've had to step into this firestorm. And I think you are doing a phenomenal job, and our AVTourism project is really in great hands. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this all goes, and doing lots of collaboration between the Landscape Conservation Program and AVTourism in the future. So a really big thank you to you, Andrew. And without further ado, I'd like to wish everybody a good night. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes on the skies, and keep enjoying those birds. Thank you for the support, everyone, and we will see you again, same time, same place next week. Keep well, everybody. Good night.
Good night.